Marshals and Chicago police have a suspect in custody after finding a woman beaten to death inside her Southside home last week.
And WGN's Christine Flores has the latest on the investigation.
Good evening. The beloved mother leaves behind 6 children, the youngest 9 months old. Family members say it has not been an easy journey through their grieving process, but they say they are standing strong for the children.
It was late on a quiet Sunday evening on Chicago's South Side. Streetlights glowed against the cracked pavement, and the sound of a distant train echoed through the night. Inside a small, warm home sat Shaniqua Kennard, a 35-year-old mother of 6. Her laughter had always been the music that filled those walls, a soft hum of love that kept everything together. She wasn't famous, she wasn't wealthy, but in her children's eyes, she was everything. Their world began and ended with her. That night she was tired but happy. She'd cooked dinner, spaghetti, her kids' favorite, and spent the evening helping with homework and folding laundry. 6 little voices called her name as she moved from room to room, tucking each one into bed. "Good night, Mommy," the youngest whispered, clutching a stuffed bear. "Good night, baby," she smiled, brushing his forehead with a kiss. Moments like that made all the struggles worth it, the long shifts, the sleepless nights, the endless bills. She always said she didn't need much, only that her kids would grow up safe, smart, and loved. But safety, that's what would fail her. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, there came a knock on her door. Not loud, not panicked, just familiar. She knew the voice on the other side. It wasn't a stranger, it was someone she trusted. Maybe someone she'd once helped. Maybe someone who'd promised to care about her in return. In neighborhoods like hers, trust was fragile. Given rarely, but deeply. And that night she opened the door. What happened next is something her family would never fully understand. When the sun rose the next morning, her home was filled not with laughter, but silence. Police lights painted the street in red and blue flashes. Neighbors gathered on porches, whispering her name. Inside, 6 small children sat huddled together, scared, confused, waiting for their mother to tell them everything would be okay. But she didn't come. The call to 911 came too late. The reports were grim. Shaniqua Kennard, a beloved mother, a woman full of faith, kindness, and perseverance, was gone. Her death ruled a homicide. The cause? Multiple injuries from an assault. News spread fast across Chicago's South Side. A mother of 6 found dead in her home. It was a headline that shouldn't have existed. People struggled to comprehend how someone so nurturing, so dedicated to her children, could meet such a fate, and at the hands of someone she likely trusted. Her family described her as a light in dark places, the kind of person who gave second chances when others turned away. She didn't have much, her cousin later said, but what she had, she shared. That's what made her death all the more painful. She had opened her heart and her door, and it had cost her everything. Behind the police tape, her children were taken to relatives, wrapped in blankets, asking the questions no child should ever have to ask. Where's Mommy? When is she coming back? But she wasn't. That single moment, that one knock, that one decision, shattered 6 lives. The neighborhood mourned, but mourning quickly turned to outrage. How could this happen to a mother who had done everything right? How could someone who survived life's hardest battles lose the final one inside her own home? As investigators pieced together the truth, a chilling reality began to surface, that trust, once given, could be turned into a weapon. That love, once safe, could become lethal. Shaniqua's story isn't just another tragic headline. It's a warning about the dangers we overlook, the people we think we know, and the hearts that break behind closed doors. And yet, through all the pain and loss, her children still speak her name with love. Because to them, she isn't a victim, she's a hero. The woman who gave them everything. The woman who taught them what love looks like, even in a world that didn't love her back. In this story, we'll uncover who Shaniqua Kennard truly was, how her trust became her undoing, how her community fought for justice, and how her 6 children are now carrying the light she left behind. This is not just a crime story. It's a mother's story, and one that demands to be heard. Before tragedy darkened her home, Shaniqua Kennard's life was defined by strength, the quiet kind that doesn't make headlines but holds families together. She lived in the Auburn-Gresham neighborhood of Chicago, where resilience was a way of life. Rent was high, pay was low, and the world didn't offer second chances easily. Yet somehow, Shaniqua always found a way to smile. Her laughter echoed through her modest home, a rented house painted in faded cream and blue, where the walls carried both love and struggle in equal measure. She was 35, but the weight she carried could have aged anyone twice her years. 6 children, each with their own hopes, dreams, and chaos, filled her days and nights. From preparing cereal before dawn to helping with homework long after dark, her routine was relentless. Still, she managed it all with grace. Her mornings started early. By 5:30 a.m., she'd already be awake, fixing lunches, laying out school clothes, and brewing a pot of coffee that she rarely had time to finish. Sometimes, neighbors would see her standing outside waiting for the school bus, wearing her pink robe and slippers, a tired smile on her face but pride in her eyes. Everyone knew her, Miss Shaniqua, the kind woman who would babysit when you were running late or lend a few dollars when someone's light bill was due. She didn't have much, but generosity didn't depend on wealth. Her heart, her family said, was bigger than her hands could hold. But behind that radiant smile was a woman stretched thin. She'd been through hardship before, heartbreak, financial struggles, relationships that started with promises and ended with pain. She was no stranger to disappointment, but her faith kept her grounded. Every Sunday, she dressed her children in their best and led them to church, walking with quiet dignity, her hand gripping her youngest's fingers tightly. To her family, she was the anchor. To her children, she was the world. To her community, she was hope, proof that love could bloom even in the toughest soil. Still, there were signs that life had begun to wear her down. She had dreams of finishing her nursing degree, of moving her children into a safer neighborhood, of giving them the kind of peace she'd never truly known. But dreams take time, and time was something she barely had. Friends remember that in the weeks before her death, Shaniqua seemed tired. Not physically, she'd been tired before, but emotionally drained, as though she were carrying a burden she couldn't share. When asked, she'd just smile and say, "I'm fine." The words so many women use when they're anything but fine. Those close to her would later say there was someone new in her life, a man she'd been seeing, though not everyone knew the details. She didn't talk much about him, but her family noticed small changes. Sometimes she was distracted. Sometimes she seemed nervous. And though she never said it aloud, her eyes hinted at worry. There were rumors, whispers that he was controlling, that he had a temper. But Shaniqua was the kind of woman who believed people could change. She'd seen the good in others when no one else could, and maybe she thought this time it would be different.
U.S. Marshals and Chicago police have a suspect in custody after finding a woman beaten to death inside her Southside home last week.
And WGN's Christine Flores has the latest on the investigation.
Good evening. The beloved mother leaves behind 6 children, the youngest 9 months old. Family members say it has not been an easy journey through their grieving process, but they say they are standing strong for the children.
There's so many people who love Niqua, who want it different for her. And if you are watching this, and people are watching this, let her loss be a testament so that you don't have to go through this and your family doesn't have to go through this.
Latasha Kinnard is referring to her sister, Shaniqua Kinnard.
She was the wild child, the spirited child. She loved to have fun, and she loved her family.
According to police, the 30-year-old was fatally assaulted in Riverdale in the city's far south side. She was found unresponsive around 8:10 Friday morning inside of her home in the 13,000 block of South Martin Luther King Drive. According to the medical examiner's office, she died from multiple injuries from an assault, and her death was ruled a homicide.
Let this be a testament to domestic violence and abuse. If a man is putting his hands on you, that's not a caring and loving man. That's not a protective man. That's not an overseeing man. That's not a man who actually wants the better for you and your future and your kids at that.
Shaniqua leaves behind 6 children, the youngest 9 months old, the oldest 13-year-old Amari Smith.
I want people to know that my mom was very kind and that she loved all the people who supported her, and she was very grateful.
Chicago police announced 30-year-old Jarv Toms Dixon was charged with first-degree murder in this case.
This is a very hard time, and the only way that I'm getting through it is with the love of friends and family and time. And at the same time, it's like there is no amount of love or support that's going to bring her back.
The family has created a GoFundMe page to help with funeral expenses and for the care of the 6 children. You can find that link on our website, WGNTV.com. The suspect is scheduled to have his detention hearing tomorrow. Reporting in the city's far south side, Christine Flores, WGN News.
Her sister recalled one night when Shaniqua came over, quiet and uneasy. "If anything ever happens to me," she said softly, "make sure my babies are okay." Her sister laughed it off at the time, brushing it away as fatigue or frustration. But those words, once dismissed, would echo painfully later. Despite her growing worries, life continued. The school year was underway, and her kids were thriving under her care. She'd recently talked about taking them to the park that weekend. She wanted to do something simple, a picnic, maybe, or an afternoon playing basketball. Just something to make them smile. But on that quiet Sunday evening in February, everything changed. The day had started like any other. She'd taken her children to church that morning, smiling as they sang hymns together. Afterward, she'd cooked dinner, chicken and rice, and spent the evening watching TV with her kids. It was an ordinary night, filled with the ordinary joy of family. Then came the knock on the door. No one knows exactly what was said, but what followed shattered 6 young lives and a community that had loved her deeply. When police arrived, what they found inside that small Chicago home broke even the hardest hearts. The woman who had held so many others together was gone. Her life ended far too soon. In the hours that followed, word spread quickly. Family members rushed to the scene, disbelief etched across their faces. "No," one of them cried, "not Shaniqua. Not her." The sight of police tape around her home was a nightmare made real. Neighbors gathered, offering prayers, hugs, and tears. The children, confused and scared, were taken to relatives, their small voices asking questions that had no answers. The coroner's report would later confirm what no one wanted to hear. Her death was ruled a homicide. Multiple injuries. No chance to escape. No chance to fight back. For a mother who had spent her life protecting others, her end was cruel beyond words. And yet, even in death, her story refused to fade. Her community lit candles, shared memories, and demanded justice. They refused to let her become another statistic. "Shaniqua was love," one of her friends said during the vigil. "She was light." Whoever did this, they didn't just take one person. They took a mother, a sister, a daughter, a friend. As the investigation began, detectives started piecing together the fragments of her life, her last conversations, her relationships, the people she had trusted. What they would uncover would shock everyone, because the truth behind her death would reveal not just one act of violence, but a chilling pattern that too many women face. The story of Shaniqua Kennard was no longer just hers. It had become a reflection of a much larger, heartbreaking truth, that love, when twisted by control and anger, can turn deadly. And what the police would find next would expose just how far that darkness had spread. When detectives entered Shaniqua Kennard's home, the air still carried the faint scent of the dinner she'd cooked hours earlier. The television was still on, cartoons playing softly, and toys were scattered across the floor, as if the children had just stepped outside and would be back any moment. But the silence in that small living room was haunting. For investigators, it was immediately clear this wasn't a random crime. There was no forced entry. Nothing was stolen. The front door was locked. Whoever did this, Shaniqua knew them. Detectives from the Chicago Police Department's Homicide Division began working methodically through every inch of the house. They documented everything: overturned furniture, the phone left on the table, the signs of a sudden struggle. And then there was her body, discovered in the bedroom, lifeless, robbed of breath and peace. The brutality of it broke seasoned investigators. But beyond the scene, beyond the yellow tape and flashing lights, there was one question that weighed heavier than all others. Who would want to hurt Shaniqua Kennard? The investigation began with her family. Her mother, holding back tears, told police, My baby didn't have enemies. She loved everybody. Her siblings echoed the same. She was protective, caring, and cautious. But as detectives dug deeper, a more complex picture began to form. They learned that in the months leading up to her death, Shaniqua had been involved with a man named Marcus Hill. He was charming at first, attentive, generous, but as time went on, friends said his charm began to fade. He became possessive, calling her constantly, questioning where she went, who she talked to, even what she wore. One friend recalled a chilling phone call just weeks before her death. Shaniqua had whispered, "He's been showing up unannounced. I told him it's over, but he won't listen." Marcus denied it all when police first approached him. He claimed he hadn't seen her that day, that their relationship had ended peacefully. But his alibi, vague and inconsistent, quickly began to fall apart. Detectives obtained security footage from a nearby convenience store. At 7:43 p.m. the night of her death, a man resembling Marcus was captured walking toward Shaniqua's neighborhood. He was wearing a black hoodie, hands tucked in his pockets, head down. Just 30 minutes later, neighbors reported hearing a loud thud, followed by silence. By the next morning, Marcus had vanished. The police issued a warrant, but tracking him wasn't easy. He'd gone off the grid. No phone activity, no credit card use, nothing. Weeks turned into months, and Shaniqua's family felt the crushing weight of injustice. Her mother spoke to reporters, pleading through tears, "He took my daughter. And he's still out there." The community rallied behind her. Candlelight vigils became weekly gatherings, with neighbors holding posters reading, "Justice for Shaniqua." Her children, too young to understand the full depth of what had happened, stood among the crowd, clutching photographs of their mother, asking questions no one could answer. Meanwhile, detectives followed every lead. They spoke to Marcus's family, former employers, even friends from his past. And what they uncovered painted a terrifying pattern. Marcus had a history, one filled with accusations of domestic violence and restraining orders that had gone unheeded. Former partners described him as controlling and unpredictable, a man whose temper could flare without warning. Each story followed the same rhythm: charm, control, rage, regret, until one day the women simply left. But Shaniqua hadn't lived long enough to leave. Then came the breakthrough. Months after her death, a tip came in from a small town in Mississippi. A local resident claimed a man matching Marcus Hill's description was staying with a cousin, keeping a low profile, using a different name. Within days, a team of U.S. Marshals moved in quietly and arrested him without incident. Back in Chicago, the news hit like a storm. Shaniqua's family wept, prayed, and exhaled for the first time in months. Her mother whispered, "Now, my baby can rest." But the arrest was only the beginning. In the courtroom, the reality of what had happened came to light in painful detail. Prosecutors laid out the evidence: the threatening text messages, the surveillance footage, the DNA found at the scene. Every piece of the puzzle told the same story. When Shaniqua ended the relationship, Marcus couldn't accept it. That night, he'd gone to her house to talk. When she refused to let him in, he forced his way through the back door. Minutes later, the argument turned deadly. The emotional weight of the trial was unbearable. Her eldest daughter, just 15, took the stand, her voice trembling as she recalled the last moments she saw her mother alive. The courtroom fell silent as she said, "She told me to go to bed early. I didn't know that was the last time I'd hear her voice." Family members wept quietly, clutching tissues, reliving the nightmare all over again. Every day of the trial peeled open another layer of grief, one that time alone could never heal. But amidst the heartbreak, something powerful emerged. Shaniqua's story began to echo far beyond her neighborhood. Advocates for victims of domestic violence began using her name as a rallying cry. Nonprofits organized awareness campaigns, urging women in abusive relationships to seek help before it's too late. News anchors spoke her name with reverence, not just as another victim, but as a reminder of a crisis that too often goes unnoticed. Behind the cameras and the headlines, her children struggled to adjust to a world without her. They were split among relatives, each trying to create some sense of normalcy. Nights were hardest. The youngest would still ask, "When is mommy coming home?" and no one could find the right words. In one heartbreaking interview, her sister said, "We're trying to be strong for the kids, but how do you explain to them that the person who was supposed to love her most took her away?" The emotional ripple of her death didn't stop at family. Her community changed too. Churches began holding workshops on healthy relationships. Local shelters reported an increase in calls from women seeking help. It was as if Shaniqua's story had given voice to countless others who had been suffering in silence. But justice still hung in the balance. Marcus's defense tried to argue that the incident was an accident, that things got out of control. But the jury wasn't convinced. They saw the evidence, the premeditation, the rage, the disregard for life. After days of deliberation, the verdict came, guilty of first-degree murder. When the judge announced the sentence, life imprisonment without parole, the courtroom broke. Shaniqua's family clung to one another, crying, whispering her name as though she were right there with them. It wasn't victory, not really. Nothing could bring her back. But it was closure, a small sliver of justice in a world that had taken too much from them. Even after the case closed, Shaniqua's story continued to resonate. Her name became a symbol, not just of loss, but of strength. Community leaders began referring to her as the woman who made the city listen. In interviews, her mother would say, "Shaniqua didn't die in vain. Her story saved lives." And she was right. The outcry led to renewed attention on domestic violence laws in Illinois. Funding was increased for victim support programs. Churches and community centers began offering counseling for families affected by abuse. Still, amid the progress, one truth remained unshakable: 6 children were left without their mother. Every birthday, every school play, every milestone, there would be an empty seat where she should have been. But those who loved her found purpose in keeping her memory alive. They started a small foundation, the Shaniqua Kennard Memorial Fund, dedicated to helping single mothers in crisis. Through that, her legacy continued to grow, rooted not in tragedy, but in love. The investigation had revealed the darkest parts of one man's heart, but it had also uncovered something far more powerful: the light of a woman who, even in death, inspired change. And though her story ended too soon, the echo of her strength refused to fade. When the day of sentencing finally arrived, the courtroom was heavy with the weight of everything that had come before. The air felt different, solemn, tense, almost sacred. Rows of wooden benches were filled with Shaniqua's family, friends, neighbors, church members, and community advocates, all wearing shirts that read in bold white letters, "Justice for Shaniqua Kennard." At the front, her 6 children sat together. The eldest, only 15, held the youngest in her lap, rocking gently as if to shield her from what was to come. Their faces carried the kind of silence that no child should ever have to wear: the silence of loss, confusion, and the absence of a mother's warmth. When Marcus Hill entered the courtroom, handcuffed, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, there was a collective stillness. No one spoke. The sound of his chains clinking was the only reminder that he was real, that this was the man who had stolen a mother, a daughter, a sister, and a friend from the world. The judge began the proceedings slowly, reading out the charges, the jury's decision, and the summary of evidence. Every word felt like a brick laid down in history, permanent, cold, and unchangeable. The prosecutor's voice was steady but weighted with emotion as she described Shaniqua's final moments, her desperate attempts to protect herself, and the irreversible damage Marcus's actions had left behind. Then came the part everyone had been waiting for: the victim impact statements. Her mother stood first. Her hands trembled as she gripped the wooden podium. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice soft yet unyielding. "Marcus, you took away my baby. You didn't just take her life, you took the light from ours. You broke our family, you broke 6 children who will never hear their mother's voice again. I want you to know, we forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. You will live with what you did for the rest of your life, and I pray that God changes your heart." The courtroom was silent except for the muffled sounds of crying. Even the bailiff turned away for a moment, his jaw tight. Then Shaniqua's oldest daughter stood up. Her voice wavered at first, but as she continued, she grew stronger, her mother's strength showing through. "I miss her every day," she said, her eyes locked on Marcus. "You took her away from us, but you didn't take what she gave us. She taught us to be kind, to love people, to stand up for ourselves. And that's what we're doing. We're standing up for her." Marcus kept his head down the entire time. No emotion. No apology. Just the same blank stare that had followed him throughout the trial. Some said he was numb. Others said he simply didn't care. But in that moment, it didn't matter, because the truth was already carved into the hearts of everyone in that room. When it was finally his turn to speak, Marcus hesitated. He looked around, his voice low and shaking. "I never meant for it to happen," he said. "I loved her. Things just got out of control." But those words didn't carry weight anymore. They couldn't undo what had been done. The judge, expressionless, leaned forward and spoke with finality. "Mr. Hill, your actions were deliberate, calculated, and cruel. You ended the life of a woman who trusted you, and in doing so, you left 6 children motherless. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The sound of those words felt like thunder. Some cried. Some prayed. And in that instant, a strange stillness filled the room. Not relief, not triumph, but something heavier, closure mixed with sorrow. Outside the courthouse, news cameras captured the moment the family emerged. Reporters surrounded them, microphones extended, flashes going off. Shaniqua's mother raised her hand and spoke with trembling conviction. "This isn't victory, because no sentence can bring her back. But justice was done today. And we will keep her name alive." That moment became a symbol, one that resonated across social media and communities nationwide. Hashtags like #JusticeForShaniqua and #ProtectMothers began trending. Influencers, community leaders, and domestic violence advocates shared her story, urging people to pay attention, to recognize the signs, and to speak up. In the months that followed, something remarkable began to happen. Her name became a movement. Churches organized workshops on recognizing abuse. Shelters began expanding their outreach programs. Her family launched the Shaniqua Kennard Foundation, dedicated to supporting single mothers escaping domestic violence. Their first project? A safe housing initiative named Shaniqua's Place, a small apartment building offering temporary refuge for women in crisis. Every detail, from the mural in the lobby to the framed pictures in the hallway, was designed to remind women that they weren't alone, that there was still hope. At the entrance, engraved in bronze, were Shaniqua's words from an old social media post. "Even when life gets hard, love your children loudly." That's how they learn courage. Her children, now under the care of her sister, began healing in their own quiet ways. The oldest daughter started keeping a journal, letters to her mom, written in the late hours of the night. The middle children joined therapy groups for kids affected by loss. The youngest ones, though still too small to fully understand, grew up surrounded by stories about who their mother was, her laughter, her strength, her kindness. On the anniversary of her passing, hundreds gathered at the park where she used to take her kids. Balloons in her favorite colors, pink and gold, floated into the sky as her mother read a letter aloud. "Shaniqua, we miss you. But your story changed the world. Your voice still speaks through us. And we will never stop fighting for the women who can't." The video of that event went viral, millions of views within days. People from all over the country commented, sharing their own experiences, thanking her family for their courage, and pledging to raise awareness in their communities. It was more than a story now, it was a call to action. Meanwhile, inside prison walls, Marcus Hill sat alone in his cell. Reports later revealed he'd begun attending faith-based rehabilitation programs. Whether it was guilt or self-preservation, no one knew. But the world outside had moved on, focused not on his darkness, but on the light Shaniqua left behind. Her name became synonymous with resilience. Her story was used in public service campaigns, educational programs, and documentaries addressing the silent epidemic of domestic violence. And in every interview, her mother's words were repeated. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Years later, as her children grew, they carried her legacy forward. Her eldest became an advocate, speaking at schools, telling other young people how important it is to recognize early warning signs in relationships. "My mom's story taught me that love doesn't hurt," she said during one televised event. "And if it does, it's not love." That simple sentence resonated deeply, sparking conversations across generations. Shaniqua's story became one of both heartbreak and hope, a mirror reflecting the dangers so many women face, and a reminder of how one tragedy can ignite lasting change. Through her, countless others found their voices, their courage, their strength to walk away before it was too late. As the camera slowly fades to black, the narrator's voice returns, soft, reflective, and steady. Shaniqua Kennard's life was one of love, resilience, and sacrifice. A mother of 6 who gave everything for her children, until love turned into danger. But even in her absence, her spirit continues to protect, to inspire, and to change lives. If you or someone you know is facing abuse, please don't wait. Reach out. Speak up. There are people ready to help you, today, right now. In Shaniqua's memory, let's choose awareness over silence, courage over fear, and love that heals, not harms. Then the screen fades into the final title card. Justice for Shaniqua Kennard. Remember her name. Share her story. The video ends with a soft instrumental and a YouTube call to action. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Together, we can make sure her voice continues to be heard, and no other mother's light is taken away in silence. And as the comments fill once again with words of love, grief, and unity, one thing becomes clear. Though her life was cut short, her story will echo forever.